The Marino Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Marino Show. I'm your host, David Marino, and I'm so excited to have my guest today. She's the reason I have this show on Austin Music Television, Candace Bellamy. She was gracious enough to let me co-host when she had a show on Austin Music TV, and now I have this show because of you, Candace. But I'm so excited to have you because I mentioned this before you. I'm always in awe of everything that you do. You're a doctor. You're a musician, you're a filmmaker, you have a podcast, that focuses on medicine. And I'm just always so proud to see all the work that you do. But today we're going to be focusing mainly on a documentary called Healer, the Dr. Joycelyn Elder's story. That this has been just a huge passion project of yours over the last couple of years, and it's done. So Candace, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, David. It's an honor to be here. And it was great when we co-hosted, and it just made sense that you would go on to your own show with your incredible talent. So thank you. I'm honored to be here today.
Well, first of all, I remember when you were working on this documentary and how much it meant to you and the hard work that you put into this. I mean, we talked at length about the process when you were going through the editing process and the filming process. For those who don't know, first of all, tell me a little about Dr. Joycelyn Elders and why this story was so important for you to tell.
Thank you for asking. So, Dr. Joycelyn Elders was the first African American Surgeon General of the United States. She served in the Clinton administration and was forced to resign after speaking about or in response to a question about masturbation, because at the time she was, it was really important in terms of reproductive rights, in terms of health. She was, she's from Arkansas, so they were number one in teen births. So, her mission was, hey, it's great to have children when you're ready. And, when you're a teen parent and, things continue to result in, decades and generations of poverty. So for her, it was just really important to spread that message, to bring that awareness, to teach that, to educate kids, to, in a way that, again, when they're ready for children, they're having those children, healthy children at that time. And so, it was in the 90s, and apparently at that time it was controversial to speak so plainly and truthfully. And as a result of that, again, she was forced to resign. But, after resigning as Surgeon General, she continued the work for decades. Even now, she's 90. She continues to speak out. So she's just an incredible person. And I started on this journey back in 2012, believe it or not, and started with the idea that I would do a film that focused on multiple women doctors, particularly trailblazers like Dr. Elders. And it was not until 2018 that I met her. And when I met her, I knew that I wanted the first film I did to really focus on her story.
Has she been somebody that you've always sort of known about or looked up to, back when you were, coming up and looking into becoming a doctor? Is she somebody that you were aware of and almost like a role model in some ways, or did you learn more about her later?
I really learned about her later, and really, again, having my own personal, not really crisis, but how you come to those points professionally where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I here? Who were the women that came before me? And when I started that research and came across her, came across the work, it just made sense to me. I thought, I have to meet her. And then again, after meeting her, I thought I want to tell her story in its entirety. Because actually, once I met her, I had done initial research, but I researched more, and I thought, we've not really fully told her story. We've told it in bits and pieces, but we've not fully told her story. And that for me, was what sparked that moment that, hey, I want to do an entire film about her.
And the film itself, you really do trace all the way back to her childhood up until, today. And, I remember you talking about shooting like reenactments from when she was younger. And tell me a little about, the overall film and what you were hoping to accomplish with this project, because it was an ambitious project. But again, I'm so happy that it's now out there, and we'll talk more about the festival stuff that's going on with it. But what was your overall goal? Obviously telling her story, but what did you want this to symbolize?
Well, I mean, for me, in telling her story, I wanted to tell it authentically, and I wanted to tell it in a way that would engage people, and to make them, at the end of that film, go, I'd like to know even more about Dr. Elders. Let me go out there and research. Or I see the work she was doing. How can I be a change maker? How can I, make a difference? Like that was my hope for the film. How I wanted it to look changed throughout the process for me. For this particular version of the film, I started in 2018 till now, so over 5 years. And so, in that respect, there were things I knew I wanted to talk about. There were things I asked her specifically, like, "What is important to you that I tell about your story?" And she said, of course, family, which is a huge part for her, and her siblings. And so that was one thing that was really cool, is to meet so much of her family, to meet her siblings and hear about their lives, their stories, along with Dr. Elders being their big sibling because she's the oldest. When I thought about how can I show the beginning of her journey, first of all, she grew up picking cotton, which we don't know anything really about in today's world. People don't talk about picking cotton. And she grew up very poor, no electricity, no running water. So again, it was, how do I tell this story, at least the beginning part? And they were so poor, there were no photographs. There was nothing to document that. And so for me, one way was to do a scene where we shot in a cotton field and sort of give people an idea of what that's like in the hot sun and 100+ degree weather, picking cotton. And so that for me was important to kind of convey like what her experience was like in the beginning. Such humble beginnings to rise to the highest medical office in the nation.
And, a lot, I guess you could say a lot has changed and a lot hasn't changed in the
Yes.
current world that we're in today. And you and I have had these conversations offline a lot, but especially considering how far to the top position, but being, the first African American, that is a hard title to hold because you're
Yes.
first, and it's almost as if it's like you have this burden on your shoulders to do everything the right way, because if you don't, then oh, there was our chance. Did she talk anything about that, or did you get some insight into how she felt about that title? Because I don't think everybody loves that per se. They just want to be, I'm in this position. But did she speak to that at all?
I think what she spoke to was the fact that she was always going to do the work. For her, it was another day at the office. So whether it was, Arkansas Director of Health, Surgeon General, she was there to do the work. Whether she was seeing patients as a pediatric endocrinologist, it was about the work. It was always about the work, and it was always going to be the truth. And she didn't sugarcoat it. And I think that's what spoke to me, so much, was that she was always herself, authentically, genuinely herself. And she didn't modify that for DC or for anyone else for that matter. And probably if she had softened the work, her message, she probably would have been in DC or, longer, but that just wasn't her way. She saw what her people in Arkansas had experienced, what they were dealing with. And she used that truth, to tell their stories and to share that message, and, why she spoke so much about healthcare and the importance of it.
And because she herself saw it growing up and experienced,
Absolutely.
firsthand what she was trying to convey. And I think that's part of the difference, is that the people she was probably trying to share this with didn't quite understand where she was coming from, because they had never been there. Way far.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, she'd seen it growing up. She'd experienced it as a doctor, as the Arkansas director of health. I mean, you see it, it's right in front of you. And again, she just had an honest, authentic approach to the way she talked about the issues of the day. And I think, sometimes people like to have it again, in a softer manner, but she didn't. But she never, yeah, she told the truth. She never wavered from the truth. It was just what it was. And that's what I love and respect about her story. And I felt like that it gave me even more of a reason to tell her story, and to again tell it, truthfully. I didn't sugarcoat her story. I told it the way it happened, and I didn't try to, make adjustments to it. And so, again, just very proud of the end result of the film, and was so honored to get to share the film with her and her husband, who gave me, the thumbs up and said, "Hey, it's excellent." I mean, really, I thought I've won, because, they both really loved the film.
When our sorority invited Dr. Edith Irby Jones to give the pyramid lecture, and she talked about the difference between the high roads and the low. And I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And she was a doctor. I didn't even realize women could be doctors, so it was obviously very influential that she was a doctor. And after that talk, I never wanted to be anything else but to be like Dr. Jones. So even though, I never dreamed of it before, and I tell people all the time, you can't be what you can't see.
Were there some moments that struck you or really stood out in, the interviews that you did with her, or her family, or whoever you spoke to in this documentary? Did you have some sort of enlightening moments yourself by just listening and hearing what people's perceptions were of her own perceptions, and just, her truth? Because, you're a pretty honest person as well, but you have to like commend somebody who stands in the face of opposition and still
Hmm.
stands their ground at the risk of losing something.
Absolutely. And I think with her, I just saw a woman who had a purpose, and again, just continued to do the work, no matter if people were, for it or against it, how they felt about it, and she used science and statistics. She used the data available to support what she was saying. It just didn't come out of the air. And that to me, again, just speaks volumes. I think when I saw some of the things that she experienced and the way people spoke about her, I think about for me, like, would I have been able to withstand all that criticism? Would I have been able to deal with the way people spoke about me? Some of it not very nice at all. And again, that wasn't something that she gave much time or thought about. She just continued to move forward. And for me, to see that in someone, that's really amazing. Really, really amazing.
So when they saw the film, her and her husband, what were some of their remarks? What did they share with you? That had to be such a wonderful experience after all this hard work that you put into it, to get their validation, like they liked it.
And it really was. So funny story. So usually when I go to her home, we always like meet in the living room. And so when I went to show the film, she was like, "Oh, let's do it in the den." And so, so I go back to the den, and I'm setting up the projector, and it's like it's really comedic because I mean, I'd get one side up and one would come down, and like that was the whole thing with the setup, and then they come in and sit and they say, no rush, we just want to be here, when you're ready. And so I'm sitting, they're sitting behind me. And so, the film starts and all I thought was, I'm not going to look back until the film is done. So that way I can't see if they like it or don't like it. If I hear them get up, I'm still not going to turn my head back there. And so I heard little whispers, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. But again, when it was done, she said that was excellent. Her husband said that was excellent. That was a star. And they went into a little bit of detail about certain parts, but mainly they felt like that's I had told their story, genuinely. And so that was really cool to get that feedback from both of them, and to know that they really enjoyed the film, that they felt it was excellent. And I think what was real sweet was, so her husband Oliver said, "Oh, she did a great job. It's so professional." And Dr. Elder said, "Well, that's what she does." And I was like, oh, just to get that, approval. And I tell you, it was nerve wracking driving down that, so I have kids, I dropped them off at my brother's house in Texarkana and then drove the rest of the way. And I tell you, that was the longest drive because you're just like, oh, I hope she likes it. If she hates it, I'll be okay with it. Not really, but I hope she likes it. So that just was a real special day for me. I'm glad I got to show them first.
I would have been so nervous sitting there. I don't know how you didn't turn around, but I mean, yeah, that is definitely a great feeling to know that they appreciated the work that you put into it and that you told their story and reflected what they wanted you to put out there. Now, this is your first film project, and most people with their first film project, because I know several people who make films now, in my interviews I do, they don't take on something this big, but Candace, y'all, goes big. Okay? Candace doesn't do anything half, and so tell me a little about the kind of the learning curve that you experienced with this film, because that's the reality of it. It was, of course, a lot of hard work, but this being your first film project and taking on something that is the subject is so important and it's an important story to tell, your expectation was very high. So what did you learn from doing this?
Oh, I learned so much. And the next documentary I do will go differently. I mean, I think, some of the biggest lessons were, oh my goodness, that's sort of, yeah, I need a moment. But there were a lot of lessons. But I think the biggest lessons is to let go of your expectations, believe it or not. Like, you have this ideal of what you think it will be, but then at some point you just have to let go. And I think it's also important too, is that the film will speak to you and tell the story. I mean, we of course, did lots of editing. There was lots of work involved in terms of the process, but the film starts to speak and starts to tell you what it's supposed to be, which is a real interesting thing. And I have that artistic part, but I also very much have that science part. And I had to let go of some of those things that for me, are very, scientific and very specific, and go, okay, let's let it breathe. Let's do this. Let's step away. So those were things that I think were important lessons for me. Also, the learning curve just about film. So I watched documentaries, I took classes, I had mentors. And then I think, throughout this process, people come to you at the right time, in the right way. And I feel incredibly blessed. The first half of the process, the project is different than the last half was, because the first half was me figuring things out. I did work with great people then, for sure, no question. But the second half was me particularly going, wow, this is a person I want to keep coming back to work with. Wow, this person has just been so incredible and gone above and beyond. And that's really neat too, is when you sort of hit your stride and you meet those people and they see the vision too, like they get it. Like just filming that cotton field scene that we did, Marty and Andy and that actress that played young Dr. Elders. I mean, it was a day trip. We drove 4 hours, and went down. We shot near sunset and drove back. And it was like, it was planned out. I had my shot list. It was a whole thing, but it was so cool because they were on board. They didn't start with, here's all the ways this can't work. It was, okay, we got this. And that was really neat. And it was really neat to have the family that allowed us to film. Like that whole cotton field was beautiful. Like, to say, hey, no charge, you come down and shoot. Like these things, they sort of do really fall into place. I'm not saying it wasn't, challenging and that there weren't hard moments. I'm saying that there's a point with a project, I think, when it's something you're doing and like you're supposed to do it, and you get real focused about it, that things sort of just start to fall in place. And I mean, I've worked, and Marty, but I've worked with him this last half, and down to the wire on a couple of things. And just to have an editor that goes, hey, yeah, I got you. I'll squeeze you in. We got it covered. The colorist, the sound person, like it's just been a really incredible experience, and great people. The archivist, like, so first of all, who knew I needed one? But will I ever do a film again without one? Absolutely not. And Jennifer, just amazing. And she shared with me and helped me with things that were outside of what I would technically consider her scope, and in the way of, archival, but legal stuff, like, hey, you need to do this. So those people that they come to you at the right time. And I just really appreciate this last half of the project, in the way that things worked. But I needed that first half to get to the second half. So, I mean, it's been a tremendous experience. And what I mean is, in terms of the next project, I'll be more organized. Organization is not my best thing. And so the next go around, I will be more organized than I was this time around.
I remember one of the things you told me, which was advice you gave me that you also got, while making this film, was you don't have to do it all alone.
Yes. And that
Because
was a bit, yeah, not to interrupt or cut you off, but you're absolutely right, because that's the other thing about medicine. We're sort of, the work we do, you can consult someone, but a lot of what you do is on your own, and you rely on yourself. And this process, this project, I had to have people help. And again, I can't say enough about the people involved, and just that, I really just value the work they brought to the table, and how collaborative. Think that's probably a big part of the second part too, was how collaborative it got, and how invested people were. And it was like, it got real interesting, real exciting, and to hear other ideals come into play. And again, not feel as if I had to make this film edit be exactly what I had in my mind. I stayed open, and as a result, other creatives came in and played a role in that, and that was really, really exciting.
And I remember something when you were talking about, because I asked, like, well, how much footage have you all shot? And it was a lot of footage that you had to go through, as with any film. I think that to me sounded like the most daunting part. I mean, not being a filmmaker, having to go through all of that and then narrowing down what you're going to use. I mean, was that a pretty long process for you? Or I think something you said earlier really kind of stood out to me, is that the film started telling itself. So did that help in the process then?
It definitely did. And so, one thing that really helped me a lot was an assistant editor who organized all the footage. Then she watched all the footage, and she created like an assembly. And so that was, I think, maybe 3.5, 4 hours. And then from there, we started to trim down the footage. And then I got a story consultant. And she was really instrumental in terms of, okay, this is telling a great story, but some of these things are telling us the same thing over and over. They don't all have to be there. And so then you start to, pull away, and then you sometimes you put back, because then you're like, okay, took too much here. but you start to, again, that story starts to tell you what needs to be there and what needs to be said. And that was the really cool part too. So all that to say is, that assistant editor was a huge help. And we went from 4 hours down to the final edit, which is 48 minutes and 17 seconds.
Wow.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see that the film now has been accepted into several festivals. What's that process been like, and what is, your ultimate goal in terms of getting it seen by a larger audience?
Thank you for asking. So I finished the film at I guess end of December, and I started, submitting to film festivals, and thought to myself, okay, it'll be a little while before I get a yes, because that's just part of the deal. It's how it works. Sometimes you get accepted in the festivals, sometimes you don't. And I was open to that because I've heard varying stories from other filmmakers, but I've already, and I'm really just honored, have been accepted into 5 film festivals, which has been, phenomenal. The first screening of the film was the DC Black History Film Festival, actually, last Friday, and I couldn't go, just for logistical reasons. But I had a friend, and she took a friend, and so the theater held 1,200 people, and they told me it was full, and that there were people were clapping, and there was just a lot of positive feedback, and I was blown away. Like, that was really special, and that's what I hope for. Maybe I don't have 1,000 or 1,200 people every time it's screened, but my hope is that the people that see it are impacted by it. I would absolutely love for it to end up on PBS, but I'm also open to wherever the film, wherever it goes, and so, uh, yeah, I'm just open to the possibilities. I think when you do a film and you spend 5 years on it, like, it's surreal to me I finished a film. It's surreal to me I finished a feature film. It's surreal to me that I'm in this place in this moment, and that it's been accepted into festivals. So my greatest hope is that as many people as possible can see it. And so, called Dr. Elders last week and told her it had already been accepted into, you know, uh, those festivals, and she was like, "Oh." And so, so, in a good way, a good surprise. And so we've talked about doing perhaps a community screening in Little Rock, and then that way, family, friends, the community can come out and see it, because I want to do that in such a way, again, just to continue to honor her and the work she's done. And so, whatever way that ends up happening, whether it's PBS, whether it's community screenings and PBS, whether it's an educational tour, like, all those things are swirling around in my mind. Um, I think when you do a film and you spend 5 years or more on it, at least for me, it was like, man, I can't believe I'm here. And I haven't really stopped to just absorb that, hey, you finished a film, this is where you are, this is great. But have pushed forward and gone, okay, we're doing festivals, we're doing this thing. And so I still have all these ideals and ways I wanted to get out into the world.